I mean, driving down yesterday, I feel a sense of sadness that I'm having to do this again. You know, the last year has been pretty challenging at times. It's been up and down, and you know, there's been a lot that the impact has been quite great on me and my family. Firstly, I want to take the opportunity to thank all the people that have got in touch to support me. You know, people have got in touch, as you'll see in the document that I've handed in, to corroborate a lot of what I've said. People have got in touch to apologise, and that on a human level has meant the world to me. I've also had a platform and an opportunity to speak and hopefully help these things being eradicated and hopefully make better throughout society. I think the downside and the difficult bits that have been that my family has been the target of abuse, threats and attacks. You know, recently my family house, there's a bloke in broad daylight who basically walked in and out of the garden on the phone before defecating, bringing a loo roll, and it looked all very planned. We had another incident where a gentleman late at night was circling with what looked like a chain in his hand. And really, if I was looked at 13 months on from me opening my heart out, all that's changed is really that me and my family has been driven out of the country, and that's the sad element of it.
Thank you. Damien Green.
Thank you, Chair. You make an interesting point that you've had a lot of messages of support. Have any of them come from unexpected people, from people high up in cricket, people in the ECB? Have any of them reached out to you?
Look, obviously, there was some statements made of apology throughout the game, really. I was invited to meet the ECB board, which I did, and which, like I said, it was really on a human level, meant the world to me. But I spoke, although everyone's made this about me, it's not about me. I spoke out to make cricket a better place so my kids could go and play. And you know, 13 months on, sadly, I mean, I would have loved to, well, not come here in the first place, but I would have loved to have come and told you how great things have been, how much cricket has changed. But unfortunately, what feels like is cricket's very much in denial, and you know, my experiences have been vindicated, corroborated, time and time again through various different organisations, as it's in that document. Yet I sit here 13 months on, 2.5 years on from when I first spoke out, and you know, there's still a lot of a group of people out there that actually feel like cricket's the victim in this.
And do you feel that this will carry on? I mean, it's almost the last question I asked Lord Patel. Do you have any kind of optimism?
Well, we live in hope. I always want to see glass half full. The difficult thing for me is what I see is, you know, you do the same things, you get the same results. There was an action plan in 1999. You know, there was an action plan last year. The same PR initiatives are being rolled out. The same community faith organisations being activated. But actually, it all feels very superficial at the top. You know, the recreational game hasn't even been looked at. And, you know, the protection or the lack of protection for whistleblowers. You know, one of the things why I spoke out was so other people didn't suffer in silence, and we're going to hear from Jahid here, Jahid and a lot of others that have felt empowered. But you know, the way I've been attacked and abused, why would you? Why would you speak out? And you know, I've got little hope in the new leadership, but it's very little at the minute.
Can I ask you the same question, Jahid? I mean, do you feel that anything has moved? I mean, you've obviously added your voice to the complaints.
I don't think it has much been changed, to be honest, because I've been very frustrated for over a year now since I've spoken out. So far I've received no support whatsoever from anyone really, from your ECBs to your PCAs to Essex even. And I just stuff, you know, I'm a victim. I just don't feel like I'll get any support from anyone at the moment. And it just shows that whether they care, I don't know, because it seems like I haven't received much support from it.
Okay, I know others are going to ask detailed questions about the Essex case, so I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Giles Watling.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for coming in today and sort of reliving some of the horrors that you've been through. And I'm really sorry you have to do that, but let's see if we can get some good out of this. First of all, I'd like to, Azeem, the attacks that we've heard you've had from the Yorkshire Post, how do you feel about that? Have you responded to that? And have they been in touch with you?
Well, where do I start? I think pretty early on, Yorkshire Post, through their correspondent, took a position. I actually have some sense of sympathy. He's known these people for well over 2 decades, and he's been fed lies, and he's believed them. It's been difficult. It's been really challenging. You know, for example, they keep reporting snippets out of the Squire Patton Boggs report, but they fail to report the central conclusion that I was a victim of racial harassment and bullying. You know, there's been match reports written on a Yorkshire Championship game with digs at me. And I think the wider impact of that, like I think George said it as well, for me, the editorial control and the senior editors and the leaders at the Yorkshire Post have a lot to answer for. You know, and the impact locally has been quite big. You know, every time there's an article, it's created a wave of online abuse. It's created, you know, like I said, there's some of the things I talked about earlier, but I got shouted at through the shop window. You know, it's been so sad that a place I've called home for 21 years, and at times I've walked down the street fearing for my life. So yeah, it's just been, and you know, the effect is quite big. Having to leave the country, it's not an easy decision.
But the Post has never made any moves towards you, offered you a platform to respond.
Look, I mean, we've had to get in touch with them sort of a couple of months ago because I think when we went through the articles, best part of over 2 years, 300 articles, with a lot basically attacking me at all opportunities. I don't feel like that at any point they've had any balance, and it's been disappointing. And like I said, the impact of that, you know, I spoke out. I knew that I would be targeted, but the way that's impacted me and my family especially, is something that Yorkshire Post should be held responsible for.
Right. We heard earlier from Lord Patel about some of the reforms and many wide-ranging reforms indeed that have been made. Are you satisfied with what's happening, or are you satisfied with the direction of travel?
Well, I mean, at Yorkshire, you know, the thing, I came here last year, I talked about accepting, apologising and showing a real will to do things in a different manner. And I've seen that through Lord Patel and the new leadership at Yorkshire. Are they perfect? No. You know, have they made mistakes? Absolutely. But they are actually trying. You know, you can genuinely see that they're trying to make sure that no other kid is called a packie within the Yorkshire dressing room. You know, and that's all we ask for. You know, we're not asking for anything other than equal fairness. I mean, Kamlesh talked about a lot of governance stuff and a lot of the paperwork stuff, which is all great. But I think the best thing that they've done is cutting the cost for kids. Cuts one of the biggest barriers to entry within the game. Right. And you can see the difference it has had on representation.
That's very good. You mentioned the cutting the cost. Are there any other further reforms at Yorkshire Cricket Club you think should happen?
I think the one thing that is very clear, that it is at the minute, it's very much a Lord Patel reliant organisation. You know, and I think my worry is, I can see he's pretty drained out. My worry is, as and when he actually leaves it, that it could go back to business as usual. And I think that's where the governing body and the game as a wide, we need to change attitudes. We need to change culture. That doesn't happen through paperwork.
Perhaps these very hearings are doing that. I'd like to move on to you, Jahid, now. When your story came out to light, the Essex Chief Executive, John Stevenson, said that he'd reached out to you to offer full support and hopes you feel encouraged and comfortable to be a part of the investigation. But your barrister then said that you tried entering into a dialogue with Essex County, but you didn't respond to the request, or they didn't respond to the request. What happened there?
The first time when I spoke out, John Stevenson just messaged me, left a message on my phone as well to say, sorry to hear what you went through, etc., etc. And since then, it just got brushed under the carpet, in my opinion, because I just haven't had nothing from Essex to check whether if I'm all right or not. Then obviously my lawyer, Amjad Khan, obviously I spoke to him about it. What's happening? So we've had interviews with the barristers over there for the investigation, and that was the only thing that I had from Essex there. Amjad approached Essex to have a meeting to talk about the things I've faced during my time at Essex, and they want to talk about all of that and have a meeting about it. And they had a bit of exchange with the emails, and then apparently they lost the email that we sent. And I find that very amazing, to be honest, because how do you lose an email? Apparently went to a junk email or something. I even check my emails all the time, and I do check junk emails to make sure it's something I'm not missing out. So I don't know how on earth can you lose an email like that. Regardless if you did lose your email or not, all it takes to reply back again, just chase it up to say, well, we have emailed you, but we haven't no response from you guys. But all you have to do is just email again to just say, or make a phone call.
So they haven't reached out since, or again?
No, it's us who's the one who's approaching them to get a meeting to have a chat. And finally, we did manage to get one. However, it hasn't gone.
It had to be you reaching out to them.
Yeah, it's always us. Yes.
Did you follow the complaints procedure?
So, I was very young back then, so I didn't know what complaint process was, because I came into an environment where all of these slurs and racial things was just normal in that dressing room. I was just a small fish in that big characters of people there. But the only thing I did make, I did speak to some of the Asian guys over there who used to play cricket there. I used to approach them and ask them, things like they used to call me curry munchers, for example, and I wasn't sure what that meant, and I used to approach them and say, what does that mean? Why did they call us curry muncher? And the advice I got was just, ignore it, just concentrate on your game, and just, don't worry about that.
Which you did for a while, but then you did eventually come forward. What made you come forward at the end? Because I think it was last year that you raised the concerns. And what held you back?
Well, that obviously because Azeem came out and spoke about and gave his testimony, and just listened to his story. I felt like I had to come out and speak about it and support Azeem, because it's not him alone in this. We all went through similar sort of things growing up playing cricket in a professional setup, and I felt I had to come out and speak about it and support that cause and his testimony that he spoke out.
Thank you. So I'm just going to re-ask the question I asked both George and Ramesh earlier about banter. And when I'm in a rehearsal room, when I was in another business, the banter in the rehearsal room would be quite extraordinary, and generally not offensive, and that's the way it works. And in a changing room, a sporting changing room, I know that banter goes backwards and forwards. When does banter become racism? How do we define this? How do we police it, if we do at all? I'll ask Azeem that first.
Yeah, look, I hate the word. I think for me, one man's banter is another person's demise. And where does it cross it? And there's been lots of attempts to downplay what I actually went through. Just to put it into context, I was called a packy, not just in the dressing room, in public places.
It gets brushed off as banter, which makes it...
Yeah, and in the end, as I've reflected over the last 13 months and last 2 years, in the end, bar staff at places were calling me the P word, a packy, right? So it's just not banter. It really isn't. And as I've said, I think banter is used as an excuse to make someone feel isolated.
Right. I see Jahid nodding away there. You agree?
Exactly the same way I feel, because I think they've using it as an excuse to make themselves popular in that dressing room by using those slurs and laugh about it. And I got that a lot throughout my whole career when I was playing there. And every time they made any kind of sort of slurs or jokes about myself and was very personal about it, you could hear the other guys are laughing with them, which made me feel very, very obviously upset about so many things. You know, things like calling me, "Would you bomb the club?" for example. I mean, in front of everyone.
Yeah,
but the people laughing about it, which made me feel like, is this?
And as George said, it's about isolating people, and
yeah,
that's what it does. Okay, look, thank you very much. I'll pass back to the chair. Thank you.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for coming and giving evidence this morning. Azeem, can I just ask you, you think that there's been an attempt from sections of the media to focus on you and make you the issue to avoid having to deal with the wider issue in cricket of racism?
Yeah, I think it feels very much like the cricket establishment needs to make this about me. And I think a lot of it was to stop other people coming forward. And it achieved that. You know, there's been a lot written about me over the last 13 months. You know, I've made mistakes in my life. One of the first things that came out a couple of days after Select Committee was anti-Semitic messages that I had made. And, you know, I did exactly what I asked everyone else to do, which is apologise, accept, and go, well, the journey bit, but, you know, try and make some learnings as to why I made them comments. You know,
when you say the establishment, what are you thinking when you say the establishment? Because I asked you about the media. Are you saying the cricketing establishment itself within the structures of cricket?
Yeah, I think it's a structural thing. I think the way it's set up is it's job for the boys. It's a boys' network. You know, you've got a friend of a friend who wants to protect. You know, I talked about David Lloyd in here last year, and I walked out of this room and I received an apology. And I spoke to him on the phone. We talked about it, and I thought, you know, it would have been a great message because David then really wanted to make sure that he was part of the solution. And I felt Sky Cricket made probably as bad a decision as anyone has through this last 2 years where they got rid of him. And I think what that created is a lot of his friends and people. You've got influential people right at the top of the cricket establishment who are former players. And what I've found is that for them to feel like they don't get implicated is to attack me. And I've felt that throughout the last 13 months.
Yeah, and the way it's been reported, particularly by Yorkshire Post. I mean, I'm the MP for Eltham, where Stephen Lawrence was murdered, and I know how the media treated Eltham as a name and as a place, and they created an environment where where racists actually felt empowered. They thought, this is Eltham, this is where racists live, ignoring the fact that racism are everywhere and it's an issue that we have to deal with across the whole of society. So I was sort of an understanding of this issue about what environment the Yorkshire Post creates with the way it writes about the story of race around Yorkshire Cricket Club. And so do you feel, and I think you've said it already, but I'll just tease it out to you a little bit more, do you feel that the way the words are used and the way it's reported is creating that environment in Yorkshire that means that you don't feel safe when you walk down the street?
Yeah, I think, you know, we talk about all these hotlines and whistleblowing, and, you know, a lot of organisations will talk about, you know, come forward, talk about it. But what environment have we created for the whistleblower? You know, I have felt like really not supported at all. You know, the last couple of months, and I want to thank the ECB on this, I've received 24/7 security from the ECB. But a lot of the times through the last 13 months, I've been attacked. And what that has created, arguably, the sort of hate towards me and my family locally, which has led me to leave. If I was to pick one reason why all this has happened, unfortunately, I'd have to say it was the Yorkshire Post's writing.
And you mentioned that the ECB are providing you with security, but do you think that they're doing enough to push back against elements like the Yorkshire Post and others?
The simple answer would be no. I think the providing of the security, you know, the security department because at times it's felt like there's real risks. Has been really good throughout, but you know, there's no protection at times. You know, I have felt that even the ECB has been involved in the leaking and the planting of some of the stories that have come out against me. You know, my medical information has been shared at different times. My data has been openly shared with a lot of people, and that for me is very alarming.
So it's just to follow up on that, since you appeared before this committee last year, you're saying that the ECB, from within the ECB, they've been involved in leaking stories to undermine you.
Yeah, and I've made that point to the new chair as well. I felt at different times there's any chance that there's been to try and discredit my experiences. Bearing in mind my experiences, like in that document, that have been corroborated, substantiated over and over again. I felt like even the ECB has tried to do that.
Would you name anyone who's been involved in that?
No, because I think for me, as I said last year, I don't think it's about individuals. I think the structural problems within cricket are a lot bigger, and that's what needs to be looked at. If we go on to individuals, all that does is allows the conversation to go on to that, as opposed to actually dealing with the real issues.
Thank you.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ahmed, can I just ask you about the Catherine Newton investigation? What's your views about that? Do you have faith in that process?
It's taken longer than what they promised. When I reached out to find out when the reports would get released, I was told it was in September, and then it just kept going. You know, we're going to finish by October. Now I've been told it's going to be finishing by December, end of December, possibly in the early New Year's. So it just keeps dragging on. But again, I don't know what the reasons are, why they're taking so long to get the report out there. Speaking with Catherine, I do think she's doing a good job, and I think she's doing a thorough investigation, and I think she is doing a good job. I feel like she's taken, listened to what I've said and taken that quite seriously, obviously. And but I just don't know what Essex are doing to support that. Whether they're doing anything to help the investigation, I don't know. I'm assuming they are investigating and speaking to the ex-players or the previous guys who played cricket before, who's in that dressing room. I just don't know whether it's Essex helping with the investigation to speak to those ex-players to say, you know, let's cooperate with these guys, make sure we get this out there. So I'm not sure whether they're doing that.
It's been over a year, hasn't it, I think, since
yes,
it was
yeah.
commissioned, the report. Have you had any, so we expect it soon, possibly, is what you're telling us, yeah? And have you had any assurances in relation to the report about whether it will be made public and available for everybody to see in a sort of transparent way? Because, as you know, a lot of the issues at Yorkshire came out of the club's reluctance to issue an independent, in inverted commas, report that had been commissioned into some of what Mr. Rafiq has told us about in terms of racism at Yorkshire. Have you had any assurances in that regard?
No.
And do you know what do you expect to happen when the report is finalised?
I don't know what action they will take. I don't know, to be honest. If I'm being honest with you, I don't know what the action we will take because there is a current player still playing who's abused me, who's racially slurred, there's a lot of things to bully me throughout my whole career, and they're still going. And I don't know what action they will take against that person. It's not just a small person; it's a big fish, and I don't know what they will do regarding that.
Do you think the report should be published in full when it's finished?
And yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Jane Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about the ECB's progress since last year. Do you feel significant progress has been made? I was reading about the South Asian Action Plan and the African Caribbean Engagement Plan, things like that. Do you think there's been any progress or good progress?
I'll talk about that. Sorry. So I work with a charity called Platform Cricket. We provide basic coaching sessions during school time, and we help a lot of kids to engage in cricket and also move on to the club system, etc., etc. We approached ECB regarding, obviously, since the issues come up, we approached them. Unfortunately, we haven't had no success, no sort of support from them to support what we do in that charity. And again, they've spoken about these 12 points, and I just don't feel like ECB is doing anything about it so far. I don't know whether they're going to look into these issues that I've put out there with the ECB guys, but I just don't feel like they're showing any support at the moment, and it's still dragging on a long time. So and still haven't resolved a lot of the issues that we spoke about.
And
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I'd love to be able to sit here and say, you know, this and this has happened, and this is where the changes will happen. Unfortunately, I feel like there's a lot of superficial things at the top. Like I said earlier, any PR activity that can bring a little bit of good PR is what's done, as opposed to, you know, after I spoke last year, the first thing I would have done is gone to the recreational game to really understand and get to the grips of the issue. The ICEC report, I think, is going to be a pivotal moment for the game. I think at that point, the game's got a choice, and I hope that is seen as an opportunity. But three things straight away that I would have done is a clear reporting mechanism, which didn't work in my case and hasn't since. I've been contacted by several people since that have gone through the same type of problems. And, you know, Jahid spoke about earlier, it's the onus is always on the victim to keep pushing, and it's draining. Secondly, I think an education element, but that's not just do some questionnaires so we can say that 35% more people have done training this year. And I think the recruitment of leadership positions, but also throughout the game, I think how that is done is really important, because at the minute what I see is representation is important, really important, but that's not alone going to solve anything. You know, I've had some of my most incredible supporters come from white people within this last 2.5 years, you know, and it feels like to me, because as a South Asian, as a Muslim, I've spoken out, there's a real sort of PR drive to make it look like there's a lot being done for that community. And I think Amnesh talked about it earlier. I feel like there needs to be a real, genuine, heartfelt commitment to making cricket a place for everyone. And that comes for, you know, working class, state schools, and people from all sorts of background. And I don't think I've seen enough of that.
thank you. Do you think the ECB has enough power to punish people when there's a case of discrimination? Or do you think, as has been suggested for football, it needs an independent sort of regulator overseeing these sort of issues? Jahid, can I come to you first?
I think they have got power. I think they do. But I feel there should be independent regulators to... because as a victim, so far I've had no support from ECB so far. I mean, it's great that we talk about cleaning up the mess and regarding the games and stuff, but as a victim, I just haven't had no support from it, and this is why I've believed there should be independent.
Have you spoken to anyone from?
Yeah, I'm the one who's approached the ECB guys about the reports and everything.
You regularly?
Yeah, I have, and the person who was investigating the case, halfway through, he moved on from the case, which I haven't been told, and then I had to call up to find out what's happening with the case, and they goes, "Oh, sorry, but that person has left, so I'm in charge of that case now." I said, "Well, when were you going to tell me about it? I mean, I don't know what's going on. I'm asking about the report. You guys keep telling me it's going to happen, but you haven't." And it just, I'm the one who's keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get something out of them. But no one actually approached me directly to speak to me, to give some support. Or what can we do for you, Jahid, for example? Nothing been done.
Thank you. Azeem, do you think an
Yeah,
independent regulator?
I mean, I think it became very clear within my case in the first bit, but it has evidently become clear. I think they have a difficult situation where, at one sense, you're a promoter, where you need to make the game look in a good light, and then you're regulating some really tough, things that doesn't make the game look good. I think just doing the simple sort of, he's bowled a couple of beamers, or he's got the wrong size bat, is something they can deal with. But I think it's become evidently clear that issues of this stature is something that they need to, independent regulator need to be brought in for. Like I said, I feel like structurally, even if they want to actually deal with stuff, the structure doesn't allow them to, and it always comes across as the victims are pushing, and there's always an excuse not to act as opposed to act.
Okay, thank you. And as a final follow-up, we briefly touched on the women's game at the end of the last panel. Do you know if there are similar incidents within the women's game, or I hope you're going to say no, we're much too civilised to...
I think obviously not being involved in that, it's difficult for me to comment. The one thing I would say, I've been contacted from people across the game over the last 13 months. This year I got contacted by a coach at a county club whose director of cricket was mocking Ramadan by holding his beer up to him. And I've had some contact from the women's game, from parents actually, more around how some of the girls are being treated. But it's not something that I am as informed of, so I wouldn't want to say that it's exactly the same, but I've had some communication around it.
Thank you. And funny, I met with some Jewish groups yesterday, actually, who were quite full of admiration for the way you did address the issues that came up around anti-Semitism, and you continue to be in contact with them. Who's the best placed sort of body to deliver sort of education when things go wrong? Because you like to feel that people need the chance to correct things and educate themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can't thank the Jewish community enough. They've brought me in, they've shown me a lot of love, and the one thing out of a bad situation is I've made friends for life, and I'm really thankful to them. I think I've been fortunate. I've had communication with a lot across the board. Some people have publicised it, a lot haven't. March of the Living took me to Auschwitz, and it was the most harrowing experience, but an experience of education that I feel like everyone should experience. And I would say that I would encourage anyone, this is not a plug for them, I would encourage anyone to get in touch with them and go on their trips to learn more about Jewish people.
Thank you. Jahid, who do you feel should be educating people in this sort of area, and where should it start? At sort of local club level or in schools? Or
I believe it should come from the school system. I work in schools myself, so this is where it needs to be taught from the start, from there. And obviously that moves on to the county. Because when I was playing cricket, we never got any sort of training talking about all of these before, to be honest. Never been mentioned about anything. You just turn up and play cricket. That was the only thing we did. I wish there was a system back then where everyone should be educated into everyone's cultures, religion, wherever it was, to be taught. And what can be said, what can't be said. It is a very sensitive sort of area, and it should have been taught there. Unfortunately, that wasn't there, which is a shame, really, because I would have thought PCA would have looked into that back in the days, NECB, to educate people about that.
Can I just add a caveat to that a little bit? There's, as I said, because I spoke out as a South Asian and Muslim, there's a lot of organisations, and this is a space I've spoken to Sport England about, that do a lot of this education work. And I feel like the funding element of that takes over and ends up then becoming part of the system. There was a situation earlier on in the summer where we read stories about Crawley Town and how the manager there had, discriminated against people and called Muslim players terrorists and stuff like that. But a lot of these organisations don't feel empowered or don't have the courage to condemn that type of stuff because they're funded by the system. And I don't know whether something, again, I've spoken to Kick It Out, is where actually which are the good ones that need to be brought in, because a lot of them, unfortunately, from my experience, are doing more damage than good.
Okay, I could probe, but I know we're pressed for time, but thank you. Thank you, Chair.
John Nicholson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming back, Azeem. Along with fellow members, I asked you questions last year, and I found it very affecting, and I know people who watched did as well. Could I go back briefly to an answer you gave earlier, where you talked about David Lloyd, former cricketer, and I've just been Googling what happened after your evidence. He lost his job, didn't he, at Sky? You told us about racist comments he'd made. He then contacted you and apologised, is that correct?
Yes.
But then he lost his job. And you think it's a mistake for Sky to have sacked him. Can you explain why?
Yeah, he made some comments. He rang me straight away as soon as I went out of here. He sent me a message. We had a good chat. And I really felt that he could be really an influential part with his profile and, and how loved he is. He could play a big part in actually us moving the conversation on to a positive. I compare it to the way the Jewish community did with me.
So he could say, I'm sorry, I've learned, and encourage other people to say sorry and to learn. But by sacking him, what's happened is that Sky presumably has discouraged other people from saying sorry because they don't want to get the sack themselves.
And that's exactly my point. The person who apologised lost his job. That's not going to encourage anyone else to come forward and accept that they've got things wrong. And, we've got to get this conversation to a place where people are allowed to, we've got to take the fear out of these conversations as well. This is where leaders come in and braveness. It's not just a one-way stream. And it's something I want to talk about more openly down the line, is like the uncomfortable conversations both ways. And I just felt at the time, if they'd have stuck with him, I just felt possibly 13 months on today, the conversation could have been a little bit better.
Are you sorry you named him?
To be honest, when I spoke last year, I just came in and I just wanted to speak from the heart, and whatever I got asked, I answered. And I think from that point of view, I'm not sorry about anything I've done,
Okay. You talked last year when I asked you about the impact on your family, and that was very moving and very disturbing. A year on, and you've given us some really deeply disturbing evidence today, including saying, and I saw the faces of my fellow committee members, you said somebody had come and defecated in your garden. I mean, beyond disgusting. What's the last year been like for your family?
Yeah, challenging, really difficult. I think everyone saw I'm quite an emotional person, and the one thing I wanted to do is come here and not be as emotional. But the last year, I spoke out, but the impact on my mum and dad, my wife, kids, it's just been, that's the only thing that's changed. I've left the country. I don't really want to go into too much of the details of it, but, there was a point in the summer because of the constant pressure. At times we were getting hounded 6 to 7 times a week by the press. Stories, same allegations, ever-changing details. One day I was batting, one day I was fielding. And it had a huge impact on everyone. And, like I said, moving abroad is not an easy thing, especially when you've got ill parents, and it's difficult.
You've been very critical and blunt about the Yorkshire Post today. If the editor of the Yorkshire Post was here, what would you say to him?
I mean, I had one conversation with the editor of the Yorkshire Post before I came to the committee, and I offered to give him and show him all the proof of what I was saying, and I was never contacted again. You know, like I said, I'm a hopeful. I would like to have a conversation and hopefully get them to understand the effect of what they've written and the effect of that in society. And that's really it. Look, I think I've said pretty clearly, I think it's had a huge impact on mine and my family's life. It's driven us out of the country. But as I was with the Jewish community, as the Jewish community was with me, I would be incredibly willing to sit down, have a conversation, and hopefully help them be part of the journey.